Hey everyone. So I was watching a clip of Victor Davis Hanson in which he was talking about the Iran war, and he discussed two interesting aspects of it. He raised two interesting points. One of them was about the United Arab Emirates and the Saudis recently carrying out some attacks against Iran and where they fit in right now. And then he got into the whole issue of why we're getting this militant talk, this tough talk out of the Iranians on their side, and he had an interesting theory about it. So I want to talk about those two issues. I'm going to play you this clip, and I'm going to stop it at a few points and comment. So let's take a look.
But this week, the two Middle Eastern countries have attacked Iran or sent bombing missions in Saudi Arabia and the UAE. This almost sounds like a pile-on of dogs after the enemy is down. Trump has said he's going to get a deal or he's going to attack. And since the Iranians are not good at bringing in deals, everybody has the feeling, you get out in the presses, that there's an imminent attack coming along. And then finally, the last thing about the war is that it's come out, not that anybody was hiding it, but the expense of the war was highlighted this week, and it's $29 billion so far. And I was wondering your idea on any of those three things.
Well, given we spent $1 trillion plus in Iraq and maybe more in Afghanistan, and we didn't get the desired results, and Joe Biden left $50 billion in equipment, the idea that you would spend less than $30 billion and with a chance to overthrow the worst government in the world that's caused most of the problems we've had in the Middle East in general and killed a lot of Americans, it's a bargain if it works. And I think it will.
You know, the problem with this argument, I'll just say, is that the people who are upset about the current Iran war, and if they'd be upset about the $30 billion number, it's not such a big number for what they're doing. Victor Davis Hanson is right. The problem with it is that it doesn't convince anyone, because they were opposed to the Iraq and Afghanistan wars also. They would say that just because that was a colossal waste of money doesn't mean they want to waste money now. So again, there are very good reasons why this war is a good idea, and it certainly is a bargain, as he said. And in terms of the potential gains economically from getting rid of the Iranian regime, it's far outweighs this minimal investment. But that's not the way people who are complaining about the war see it. Anyway, let's move on.
Oh, but when you look at the UAE and Qatar and Oman, excuse me, and Oman and Saudi and Kuwait, you're talking about 600 combat aircraft. So when they kept pushing the United States, if you're going to come here, finish, because we're getting hit with 5,000 drones or missile, you would have thought before now they would have said, well, we're going to pledge 100. They could have gone to the United States. I guess they didn't want to be bombing at the same time Israel was, because that would be a domestic problem for them. But the point I'm making is they could have carved out a whole section right across the Gulf and said, this is your responsibility. You have 600 aircraft. They don't have any. They don't have much. Go to it. They didn't do anything. And now they're sort of worried that people have talked about that, and they want to come in and say, well, we'll help you destroy them, but they haven't committed the bulk of their forces.
Okay, I don't entirely agree with this line of thinking where he said that the reason that's motivating the Saudis and the Emiratis to currently be attacking the Iranians is that people are talking about the fact that they didn't do anything. So it's kind of like a face-saving move. Now, he's absolutely right that joining the war alongside Israel would have caused them tremendous domestic problems. And that speaks to the fact that the populations, the popular opinion in the street, even in a place like the Emirates that has been very favorable to Israel, is going to take much longer to change, if it's ever going to change. Especially in Saudi Arabia, very strong anti-Israel sentiment within the population. They need a whole generation or two of re-education to change that. I interpret things a little bit differently. I mean, he's correct when he says they could have carved out a section of the Gulf and said, this is your job. But I don't think it's the Gulf. I think that's the wrong play. You see, the Israelis and the Americans were coordinating so carefully and so extensively on all of the airstrikes and all of everything they were doing to Iran, that it doesn't make any sense why they would want the UAE and the Saudis to get involved with airstrikes of their own, with their own air forces. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, think about how delicate all of that coordination and cooperation must have been. And now you're going to have some Saudi or Emirati pilots coming in saying, okay, we're with you. We want to join. We want to be a part of this. And what are you going to have them do? It only makes things more complicated, and they don't have the skill level of the Israeli Air Force or the American Air Force. That said, he's correct that there are other arenas where they could have used their military might. Specifically, I think about the Houthis. The Houthis are over on the other side. They're on the other side of Saudi Arabia, down at the Bab el-Mandeb Straits, at the opening to the Red Sea, and that's where they could have really used the help. In other words, that's where the Saudis and the Emiratis, they could turn their firepower on the Houthis without getting in the way of what the Americans and the U.S. are doing in Iran. That would have been a better move. But the real question is, why are they attacking Iran now? And so Victor Davis Hanson chalks it up to them, this kind of face-saving move. That could be, but I think that there's a simpler explanation, which is that, first of all, there's no coordination going on between the U.S. and Israel right now. So that problem of disrupting the delicate U.S.-Israel battle plan is not an issue right now. But also, I think there's another dynamic going on. Trump did not come to the aid of the Saudis and the Emiratis in the last few weeks when the Iranians started firing more drones and missiles at them. They have very real concerns that if the Iranian regime stays intact in any way, that they are going to be firing at the oil assets, at the energy assets of the Saudis and the Emiratis. They've already warned that they'll do it. And I think that they're flexing their muscles now to show the Iranians that they're not just going to sit back and let America make decisions about their national security. They're going to take matters into their own hands, and that they have firepower of their own. They're very concerned about these short-range missiles that the Iranians have right on the other side of the Straits of Hormuz, pointing at their energy assets. Not just them, also Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, the other Gulf states, Oman. Oman's less concerned because they have a much better relationship with Iran. But they're very concerned about these short-range rockets to damage their facilities that Iran has already threatened that they will fire. So I think there's even though it's technically in retaliation to these Iranian drone attacks, I think there's something preemptive about what the UAE and the Saudis are doing, essentially sending a message both to the United States and to Iran that they're not going to necessarily be beholden only to the United States battle plan. They have national security interests of their own. Although I would suspect that once the Americans get involved in bombing again, especially if it's coordinated with the Israelis, that the UAE and Saudi Arabia will probably take a step back. So that's my take on this point that he makes here.
That's the first thing. And the second, behind all of this tension, so we had 32 days of war, and now we've almost had 40 days of merchandising, haggling. I wish we had just finished it, because you can't trust these people. You can't talk to them. If we had spent 40 days and just taken out all of their dual use, I don't know, their bridges, all their loading facilities on Korg Island, and that corridor across from Korg Island, and the corridor across from the strait, and just devastated it, then I think we'd be in a lot better position. But what's happening now is, I think that these negotiations are going on, and we are saying we don't really know who's in control. But more importantly, there must be people in Iran who are talking in a bellicose fashion and want us to bomb. Now, that sounds crazy, but I have a feeling they know that if we go back to war, they have given us back channels that we will represent. We don't need to have a democracy. You don't need to let the people. You can use us, and we won't use terrorism anymore. We won't get a bomb. But we can't say that. We have to sound bellicose, or they're going to kill us. But they're going to sound bellicose in hopes we do something and target the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and the theocrats and some members of the military. So I think that's what's going on. They're all playing these games with each other to sound who can sound the toughest to protect themselves from each other. And then they're all trying to send in back channel signals that if you do take out the hardliners, we're here to help.
So this is an interesting theory. Let me just sum up his theory first. His theory is that the tough talk that we're seeing, and I've showed it to you if you watch this channel, we regularly take a look at Iranian regime media, and we see all this tough talk about, the America's going to pay and we're going to war. There's a headline today in WANA about how they're training citizens to use AK-47s, and they're running instructional videos on TV so that everyone can join the fight when America invades. It's very militant talk, and they're driving this hard line. And what he's saying here is that the reason that they're doing all of this is kind of twofold. That they have to save face. They can't, to each other, they can't appear to be capitulating, but that also they actually want the bombing to resume. And this is the most interesting thing that Victor Davis Hanson said. His theory that they might actually want the bombing to resume because even these hardliners, well, not the most hardliners, but even those who are talking tough talk, he's probably referring to people like Pesach and Rabbi, who he views them as not in the same category as the hardline IRGC guys. I think that that's really cosmetic, and that they are more closely aligned. But basically, let's keep the point clear. His argument is that there are people near the top of the regime who are saying, listen, you can work with us, we'll take over, but we can't be doing that as a capitulation, giving into your demands in a negotiation. So what they actually want, because they can't do that, they can't give in. So the negotiations can't be the way that we get to, if the goal is to get to a stable government run by some of the technocrats, some of these corrupt regime technocrats who remain, what we've called the Venezuela model that Trump really wants. And that's what this whole negotiation is about. He wants to keep things from devolving into chaos and work with some reasonable people that he can get to do his bidding, who remain from the regime so that the apparatus stays intact enough that it prevents chaos, but he has people to work with. And what Victor Davis Hanson is signaling here is that he believes that there are people near the top who want the bombing to resume, because if there's more bombing, taking out more of the clerics and the hardliners and the IRGC and the Besiege, and that destruction moves ahead, it will make it easier then for these opportunists to step forward and say, okay, now we'll work with you, now we'll become the government and step in then. But capitulating in the current negotiation, they can't, so they actually want the bombing to resume. I hope that made some sense. That's the point he's making. That's the argument that he makes here. And it's interesting. It has some merit. And that's really what motivated me most to make this video, was that very interesting point. Because I've been wondering about this myself, looking at all the tough talk, and sometimes it seems so over the top. And this idea that they actually want the bombing to resume because it'll make it easier for it'll make it easier for them to make the transition to where they become the ones who cooperate with Trump, but they can't do it in the current environment. Very interesting point by Victor Davis Hanson.
They can't say that again. And Iran is the one that orchestrated the whole thing. They are the ones that subsidize the Houthis, Hamas, and Hezbollah, and they don't have any money right now. And they have paid enormous $500 billion in infrastructure and military stuff. Just to sum up, the $64,000 question when Iran keeps threatening us is, nobody knows how many missiles they have and drones. And I don't think they pose a existential threat to us, because the Navy have been batting them away like flies, but they terrify the Gulf that they'll overwhelm their air defenses and they'll destroy and they have legitimate worries. So that's the only leverage they have over us, and then trying to damage tankers coming in. But if Trump wants to stop all that, I think he could do it in a week. And I think they would concede. Because I can tell you what would happen. He would go in and he would try to hit all of the bridges. He would try to hit all the oil unloading docks, all the ports, probably some of the pipelines, probably the generation plants. And then the Israelis would be having a long, long list of the Republican Guard, and they would go down that list, and they know where they are, and they would eliminate them. And then probably the Gulf states would be opportunistic, go in and do whatever they needed to do. And within a week or two, Iran would be a mess if it's not now.
I think Trump is getting close to that.
He's getting
or at
close
least
to
it
that because
sounds
he
like.
knows that what Iran is doing, they're trying to help the American left. And their whole strategy is, even if they make a deal, the deal will be for 4 or 5 years. And it'll be contingent on hoping that Trump is so unpopular that Vance or Rubio wouldn't win anyway, and they'll get a Joe Biden, Barack Obama figure. Any Democrat, look at the Democrats. Just to say that in 2029, Iran is still trying to rebuild it, and there's President Buttigieg, or there's President Newsom or President Harris. You know what they're going to do.
God forbid.
Yes, they're going to help them, and they're going to give more money to them and relieve them of sanctions because they like them.
That's the big fear. Before I finish up here, before I comment on this, I just want to remind everyone we have a very important event taking place on Wednesday. That's just this week, Wednesday the 20th. And it's a webinar, Will America First Stand with Israel? I'll be leading it and moderating, and my three guests, we're very excited. Three very esteemed guests are Josh Hammer, Senior Editor at Large at Newsweek, host of the Josh Hammer Show, Dr. David Wormser, who is the Senior Analyst for Middle East Affairs at the Center for Security Policy in Washington, D.C., really one of the great Middle East experts and experts on the U.S.-Israel relationship. He also served in multiple administrations. And Pastor Rob McCoy, who is founder of TPUSA Faith and senior pastor of Godspeed Calvary Chapel, and was Charlie Kirk's pastor and close mentor and confidant. He traveled a lot with Charlie, and again, he led a big component of TPUSA with Charlie, and he knows the America First movement intimately. So they're going to be joining me for this incredible webinar Wednesday, 1 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Israel time. Sign up for it, even if you can't make the time, because by signing up, you will then automatically get an email with the full webinar after it airs. It'll be live if you attend it, and that might also give you the opportunity to participate in a Q&A component of it. We'll see if we can fit that in, but again, even if you can't make it, sign up for it. And you can sign up at the link in the description of this video, or you can use this QR code. You can scan this QR code and it'll bring you to the sign up page for this webinar, Will America First Stand with Israel? Josh Hammer, David Wormser, Pastor Rob McCoy, and yours truly. And that'll be Wednesday. All right. So on what Victor Davis Hanson was saying here about the Democrats, about who will be president next, this only underscores the urgency. Hovering over this entire story is the very grave danger that this regime is still in power when Trump leaves office. Because no matter who comes next, and it's not just the Democrats, it's very nice that he's talking about how terrible it'll be if it's a Democrat. But if we end up with a president like a J.D. Vance or someone else from the more isolationist wing, or someone who's just not Trump, who doesn't have that conviction about Iran, because we know that Trump has been on the Iran issue for decades. It could be a very dangerous situation. And from where I sit, that's to me the most critical issue here, is that looking at where politics are headed, this connects with what we just said about America First and Israel. Because when you look beneath Trump at the rest of the America First movement, it's not so clear that the America First movement is firmly in Israel's camp. And certainly has a lot of isolationist tendencies. And the question becomes, what happens if this regime remains in power after Trump? And that's why they're delaying so much. This fits into everything else he was saying. The reason for all these delay tactics is they want to get closer and closer to the midterms and make it more likely that they end up surviving what Trump is doing. So, yeah, that's what I wanted to share today. Again, just to sum up the two key points that I wanted to share, there was the point he made about the UAE and Saudi Arabia, where about why they're attacking now and why they didn't attack earlier. And I shared my thoughts on that, as well as this issue of the tough talk that we're seeing coming out of certain quarters of the Iranian leadership, and Victor Davis Hanson's very interesting assertion that maybe they actually want the bombing to continue because it'll make it easier. It'll facilitate them actually becoming the top people who end up inheriting the throne and working with Trump. But they just can't do it in this current environment. They can't capitulate. But more attacks will bring them closer to a point where some of the hardliners and the IRGC are eliminated, and then they can step forward and say, work with us. Very interesting theory. All right, folks, I'll leave it there. Thanks for watching. God bless. Keep sharing and subscribing. And please drop a comment. I read as many comments as I can. I'm always trying to get better at this. God bless.